How you doing, my brother? How you feeling?
Hey, I'm doing well. A Friday, we're getting ready for the weekend. How are you?
And a slow ass week in Dolphin Land, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it started off with a lot going on, owners' meetings and hearing from Mike McDaniel, and but aside from that, then yeah, a pretty slow week. We haven't had anything really happen since Odell Beckham Jr. at the end of last week, and no signings, nothing like that. So we're getting into that part of the offseason.
Let me ask you something because I talked about this yesterday on the show. Is there a chance that Tyreek Hill is playing his last year with the Miami Dolphins coming up? Because I looked at the SPO track, and after this season, the cap hit drops to 22, and the dead cap. And you think about it, they could make him a June 1st cut if the from here to the end of this coming season, let's say they're not happy with again some other off-field issues or inconsistencies, or they do have to give contracts to new people next year. And so they do kind of have an out. And I was thinking that maybe they hang on to him for 2 more years. But this offseason, when they needed money, they did not go to Tyreek. And that's interesting because they kind of stayed away from digging in there and extending that stuff because, as you know, the more you guarantee, then the more commitment there is down the line and more dead cap money that increases for you. So I'm not saying it is, but I'm just saying that the Dolphins have kind of put themselves in a position that if they have to do it, and remember they're creating a lot of cap space for next year. They might have created themselves an option just in case to protect themselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say that last part that you just said, the just in case. So I think
Right.
ideally you want Tyreek Hill to be a part of your team, foundationally a core piece to this group going forward. That's why you brought him on. That's why you traded 5 draft
Of
picks
course.
to get including high end draft picks. So yeah, you want him performing at his highest level and helping to win and all that, and in the Mike McDaniel offense. But I think he's given you enough reason to give yourself that leeway, give yourself that out in case these problems continue to stack up. And it is interesting that he wasn't one of the guys that was restructured because really you had the most money to gain between him, Jalen Ramsey, and Bradley Chubb. Ramsey and Chubb,
Message sent, buddy. Message sent. Okay.
yeah. And there was even talks that maybe they were looking into an extension too. So it's not, it might not entirely be all that, but I think just with issues off the field continuing to uh, stack up against them, then you do want to give yourself an out in case this happens. But you want to believe him. You want to believe that he's going to be a changed man at some point, even though every time he says it, then there's still something else that pops up. But you want to see him act and not just say it.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up yesterday because there's that option. It's there, and they've created it, and I think that that's something that now I think uh, people, whether it's writers or fans or talking heads, I think we need to go back to kind of looking a lot of times at the way these guys structure contracts because Shore and company are pretty smart and they keep themselves flexible, from one season to another. And one of the things that they're also doing, which I think it's kind of, it's kind of come up now after all these new free agent signings, when people then go back to break down these contracts, the Dolphins have done a really good job of designing these contracts in a way that gives them flexibility, correct?
Yeah, always. That's something that Chris. I mean, every time we have Chris Greer, whether it's at an end of season, whether it's draft time, then he's always coming back to that aspect, that flexibility that the Dolphins, as an organization as a whole, work together toward. From Stephen Ross at the ownership level, giving them that freedom because he's willing to spend. Brandon Shore doing the cap gymnastics and mathematics to make it all happen, and Chris Greer just being aligned with it in making the moves that could maximize all that extra space they use from the restructures, from going ahead and manipulating the cap. So while they're still spending more, getting guys paid, but keeping the cap hit low and adding the void years, doing all those things to.
So I wonder, because when the offseason first started, okay, the Dolphins are taking a step back. The Dolphins are resetting. The Dolphins are um, going cheap in free agency, and then now hindsight is always 2020. But now I'm reading. Okay, well, wait a minute. Um, when you start looking at the positions from some writers, not all, some are saying now, hey, wait a minute. They actually did a pretty good job of replacing a lot of these guys. Hey, by the way, they did a really good job with these contracts. Hey, by the way, Vegas now, instead of 9.5 and 8.5 the last 2 years, has them at 10.5, actually, the over and under. So everything went from, oh, well, this is a reset year, which I don't believe it's a reset year whatsoever. Actually, I expect them to, because as we've talked before, the one magic thing that everybody keeps leaving out is, brother, they've been completely injured the last 2 years. If they're healthy or somewhat healthy pretty much, and most of those players are back, they're way better than they've been the last 2 years, just by health purposes. So is the perception of where the Dolphins were going, are at, or headed to a little bit different now after the month of free agency and everything else that's gone on? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think everyone went into a little bit of a panic mode that first Monday when the Dolphins were at that point down 3-4, was it? They were down four players right before they ever got one signing, right? And then some of them some key ones, obviously. Although you anticipated some of the big departures, Christian Wilkins, Rob Hunt, and then Andrew Van Ginkel. That one kind of hit because everyone really wanted to see him back with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb's injury situation, but. I think there's a lot of factors into why maybe like Vegas is increasing the betting odds or increasing the win total over under for the season. One of them actually being that it helps them in 2024 that they lost the regular season finale, as odd as it is, to the Buffalo Bills and finished second in the division, because that created it where you are now going, instead of like at Baltimore, you go at Cleveland in the AFC North. Instead of at Detroit, you go at Green Bay, which is still going to be a good team with, under Jordan Love. And what's the other one? Instead of in the AFC West, instead of hosting the Chiefs, they host the Raiders next year, who finished second in the AFC West. So there's three games there where those are on the Buffalo Bills schedule, the tougher ones, and the Dolphins have the easier of those three divisions. So things like that, and especially then you just look at the team naturally, the third year of Mike McDaniel in this offense. Another year where you have Tua still under his rookie contract, and then they're trying to get him extended, but just before that big money potentially hits. And then you have Tyreek Hill at 30. You have Jalen Ramsey at 29. These are some prime years for some key players. You still have Teron Armstead. So, yeah, this is a win now of season, regardless of what players were lost. You bring in some of the talent on the back end, and then still needing to fill in some holes. Obviously, defensive tackle, you lose a guy like Wilkins. You bring in several bodies that are probably going to be in a rotation, but you still don't have the talent to accompany Zach Sealer on that line, really form that 1A, 1B tandem like you did have. Interior offensive line, still got to work some things out, but you still have to draft, and you still have the later stages of free agency, especially when you have extra money coming in post June 1 with the $18.5 million from the Xavier Howard release.
Yeah, no, you're right. The only thing I don't ever do, I stopped doing that several years ago. I don't play the schedule game, because the schedule game for me is it's kind of dangerous,
Yeah,
and you don't really know, like Green Bay or Detroit, is it really that much of a difference? They're both just as good. It's going to be a pain in the ass to play either one. You know
Well,
what I'm
Detroit went to the NFC Championship game, and now Green Bay did also make the playoffs, but kind of that they were that last seed actually, but that they were impressive in that game against the Cowboys, and then held their own very well against the 49ers. So they probably have some high hopes for themselves as well.
Yeah, in 2022, I'll go just to have a little fun. I'll go over the schedule. They ended up beating Buffalo 21-19. They beat Baltimore in Baltimore 42-38 when they had that massive comeback. They beat Pittsburgh. They beat and these are teams that probably they would have, people would have picked against them at the beginning. It's, oh no, they're not going to beat Buffalo. Oh, they're not going to beat Baltimore, and they went and beat those teams. You know what I mean? Hell, they opened up and beat New England. Nowadays, you say, oh, they're going to beat New England. 3 years ago, you're like, I don't know if they're going to beat New England. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like it's funny like that. The San Fran, okay, you can predict that they're going to lose. At Buffalo, they're going to lose. They lost to Green Bay that year. They lost at New England that year. So it's hard for me to predict regular seasons because you just don't know who's going to be good, who's not, who's going to be injured, who's going to be healthy, all of those kind of things. But to me, if Vegas thinks 10.5, brother, it's changed. I've won the last 2 years with the Dolphins, the over. Now you're making it harder for me now. Now I got to get to 11 wins for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like the Dolphins historically are a team that the odds underestimate because the odds are based largely on bettor perception. So it's just kind of like what the masses believe about a team. So I think when you have the masses outside of Miami that don't believe in Tua, don't know much about McDaniel, and think this and that about the Dolphins, then you end up with these lower win totals. But I think now the Dolphins have had a couple seasons where teams can see them and that they were brushing up against the number one seed deep into the season, and then they only lost it at the end because of all these injuries. So that does result in an increase in the win total over under because now a lot more people in the masses outside of Dolphins fans and those who follow the team are kind of becoming aware of what the Dolphins have been building over some time now.
Have you heard anything on Odell? Because I haven't heard anything myself on my end, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's been quiet on that front. Just the last thing was, when McDaniel said that they did indeed offer him on that visit that was last week, and and like you said, nothing imminent right now. So I don't think anything has become more imminent in this past week. So I think now we're kind of at a stand. And also, the Dolphins brass has been out going to pro days. We know they were at the Texas one, the Michigan one. Within this past week, just at owners' meetings early this week. So they've had a lot of other things on the docket. So I think maybe that'll pick back up pretty soon, or maybe Odell wants to take his time, take another visit. So we'll see how that plays out.
We'll wrap it up with this. Would you use now in the new return rules Tyreek, Waddle, Achane as returners? Because I would. I have no problem. They're not coming from 40 yards downfield at 100 miles an hour. They've got blocking right in. It's really like a running play. So for me, I don't have a problem now. Not Tyreek all the time. It's the fourth quarter. You're down by a
Right.
score. You know what I'm saying? That's when I would use Tyreek. But Waddle and Achane, I wouldn't mind sprinkling them in every once in a while in this new return game. Now, I also think that this will lead you to trying to find a receiver / returner in the draft, maybe in that fifth round, right? Fifth, right? They don't have a third and a fourth, right?
They don't have third and fourth at this
So
moment.
maybe in the fifth they can find some kind of a returner and bring them in. I can see them doing that too. But let's say, for shits and giggles, you don't go draft a returner. You don't really sign one. You have your roster right now. Would you use those guys and sprinkle them in as returners?
Yeah, and you have so many options on the roster right now, so I don't think you need to go and get another specialist because you have so many fast guys. You have Berrios who knows how to be active in the return game and has done that for years. So I would like to see some of those superstars sprinkled in. Now, I don't know about rotating too many of them, because then I don't want too many different guys handling the kicks and punts. Well, we're talking about kickoff specifically. I don't want too many different guys where maybe they get one chance in a game, because then someone comes in cold, hasn't really practiced that much at it. You have to get all these guys reps too, and then you don't want a guy dropping one, and then that's catastrophic. So maybe if you have either Tyreek or Achane, that they get their fair share of practice, along with Barrios to be secure with it, and then situationally you decide when you feel like, all right, it's kind of worth it right now. Let's go for it, because in reality it is another play. And I think Mike McDaniel has expressed, going back to his first year and receiving questions about whether he'd use a Tyreek Hill first year that he had him in the return game, and he always seemed a little bit open to it, although he never really acted too much on putting him back there. But describing those special teams plays as, another play, the same way it would be on offense. So it's another opportunity to move the ball down the field. So why not? Especially in key situations, why not go ahead and use the best talent you have carrying the football with the ball in his hands, that can hit these top speeds and next-gen stats have laid out for us, that these guys are going 22 miles per hour while carrying the football. Why not give them a shot in that setting?
Cool stuff. All right, what do you got going on in the Sun Sentinel so folks can check you out?
Yeah, myself and my colleague Chris Perkins, we're going into next week about to start really rolling out some draft content. So we're going to be breaking down, I break down a lot of the Dolphins' current roster at different positions. He looks at a lot of the draft prospects, and then we alternate putting out mock drafts. So that's going to be a lot of what April has in store for us coming up.
Any truth you got a punter in the first round?
Yeah, only in fantasy football. Only in fantasy football.
Follow him on Twitter at David Furones _ catch his exceptional work there at the South Florida Sun Sentinel. David, as always, thank you, my brother. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You got it. There you go, David Furones. And make sure you subscribe to the South Florida Sun Sentinel and save this number, because if you may not need a lawyer right now, but you might need one next week, next month, 6 months from now. And you're going to go, man, who are those guys that Big O talks about all the time? Jeff Welt, Daniel Rheaume. That's right, Welt and Rheaume. But you want to know the number. Save it on that cell phone, 954-966-4646. The consultation is completely free.